there, welcome back to the channel. I hope everyone is doing alright in these first weeks of this new year of 2022. We all wish that we wouldn't have to talk about this topic yet again, but after 2 years the issue with its new variants is unfortunately more present than ever. Yes, today we are covering the topic of the COVID-19 pandemic. How is MLM related to the global economic crisis? Let's get into it. The Great Depression, the Great Recession, and the Great Lockdown. When the economy goes bad, fraud thrives. It's like a virus that has found its perfect host. Scientists warned us from a global pandemic, but when it hit, we were unprepared. In late 2019 and early 2020, nobody would have thought what situation we will find ourselves in just a few months later. Even though several vaccines were invented and many people around the globe got their shots, we're still dealing with different variants of the virus that keeps hitting in waves. Now, at the beginning of 2022, we still don't know how, when, or if we will ever return to a normal life. As history showed us time and time again, economic crises provide the perfect conditions for fraudsters. The lack of trust in the government and its politicians does not only generate from the pandemic, but also the climate crisis, inflation, and corruption, just to name a few. Quote, "The Great Depression was the worst economic downturn in the history of the industrialized world, lasting from the stock market crash of 1929 to 1939. The COVID-19 pandemic is arguably the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression." Quote, "The cumulative loss to global GDP over 2020 and 2021 from the pandemic crisis could be around $9 trillion, greater than the economies of Japan and Germany combined. It is said to be much worse than the world economic crisis at the beginning of this millennium." Quote, "The United Nations said that the COVID-19 pandemic's impact on the world of work was 4 times worse than the 2008 economic crisis. Let the good times roll, fraudsters and crises." This ongoing nightmare pushed many people closer to the edge of poverty by sudden unemployment. The desperation for money became omnipresent, which has, amongst other things, led many to turn to alternative ways of making money. As a matter of fact, there are many different scams that people had fallen for that are equally sketchy, but today I will argue that multi-level marketing companies are benefiters of this pandemic. Quote, "As the COVID-19 pandemic sends the economy into its worst tailspin since the Great Depression, some MLM distributors are wooing new investors with promises of big money and the opportunity to work from home, seemingly ideal for people who are unemployed. With many people finding themselves out of work and therefore looking for ways to making a living, MLM chimed in to save the day, at least for a while. It is safe to say that there are many losers in this pandemic, but very few winners, multi-level marketing being one of the big winners, of course." Quote, "Industry data shows participation in direct selling, the umbrella term for the sales industry that includes MLMs, grew by 20% in 2020 as the COVID-19 pandemic hit. Pyramid and Ponzi schemes are generally illegal, fraudulent operations which work in their particular way of a pyramidal structure or a rob Peter to pay Paul principle. According to consumer advocate Robert L. Fitzpatrick, the pillars of MLM include, amongst others, pay-to-play and extreme money transfer from the bottom to the top, and of course the last ones and first ones in. That description matches the reality of how most MLM companies operate, but of course they don't tell you that. Instead, they tell you a story, the legendary myth of the income business opportunity. The business opportunity pitch that every distributor gives you in the beginning is ethically even worse than usual during these trying times. Some companies are or have become honest enough to admit that in MLM it is not that easy to achieve a full-time income or any income really, but most still aren't. As we have discussed in previous videos, distributors will go out of the way to tell you anything you would like to hear from them in order to sign you up. Sadly, MLM and the COVID-19 pandemic are a match made in heaven. The conditions for this business model to thrive has never looked better, and I'll tell you why. First of all, many people have lost their jobs and there aren't enough new ones or additional ones. Inflation is at an all-time high, so you get less bang for your buck, and the prices for everyday goods like groceries and gas have increased, which means people have less money to spend, fewer ways of making more money, and they can buy less with the money they have. At the same time, they have to feed their family, pay their mortgages, loans, and of course their bills. I can only imagine how desperate many people must be as they're moving closer and closer to the poverty line. Social distancing and several lockdowns increased online sales. Many MLMers are selling their products via social media, and of course people felt lonely and were looking for a connection with others. Lastly, shops were closed because of the lockdowns, so direct selling really sounds like a good way to still make money. As always, nothing is as it seems. Again, or rather more than ever, people were told that MLM is an income opportunity where people can make as much money as they're willing to invest. In this industry, it is always up to you to make it work, and if you don't, you feel lonelier and broker than you have ever before. MLM should finally be seen for what it is, but even the wise man stays blind through the mist if something is advertised incorrectly. Conclusion. Will they ever stop making these outrageous business opportunity claims? I don't think so. The MLM business model is inherently flawed for exactly that reason. Companies leave it up to the distributors how they sell their products, with little to no input or proper education on the product itself and sales ethics in general. Plus, it makes it particularly easy for those on top to say they are not responsible for their distributors' actions. Has it really become a valid argument to simply state, well, if someone is stupid enough to invest in such things, there must be some kind of responsibility taken by these companies, and if not, at least some regulation measures and consumer protection needs to be put in place, because the ones existing are obviously insufficient. Quote, the resources and time required to determine if a company is operating a pyramid scheme make it impossible for the FTC to investigate every MLM with questionable practices, experts say. It's like a policeman trying to stop cars that are speeding on a highway, says Peter a retired FTC economist. Thank you so much for watching my video. I hope you liked this one. We have more interesting topics coming up, so stay tuned. And as always, guys, please give me a big thumbs up and subscribe to the channel to help me grow so we can reach even more people with this important message. You can also leave me a comment down below if you have any suggestions for a future video. I'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.